Please welcome Angela Garbes.
Hi. Yes, you won't break my soul. This is the exact right music for me. Thank you. Wow, this is my first Makers conference, and I just have to say I'm thrilled. I'm so happy to be with you all today. And I want to start by saying that the only reason I'm able to be with you all here today is because some other people are doing my other job, my real job, which is taking care of my children. And those people include my spouse, preschool and elementary school teachers, my father-in-law, my parents, my neighbors, and some good friends. They're all pitching in so that I can be here. And I would bet that the same is probably true for a lot of people in this room. Yeah, so shout out to caregivers. Yeah. So, care work, which is exactly what I'm here to talk to you about today, is the work that makes all other work possible. My latest book, Essential Labor, was really born out of a lot of grief and anger that I felt as a mother during the pandemic. For most of 2020 and a lot of 2021, I had to stop doing my professional work. I became a full-time caregiver. I'm here with you all today, so I'm doing all right? I am a successful writer, but my job as a creative person does not give my family a regular paycheck. It does not give us health insurance the way that my husband's job does. You know, it was obvious to me that taking care of my children, who were just 2 and 5 at the time, and by extension, taking care of my community, was the most important work that I could possibly be doing. You know, it was easy to commit to care work, but I gotta tell you, each day was a pretty tedious and endless cycle of changing diapers and cooking and cleaning, doing laundry, all of that. Frankly, it was terrible. I really felt so much of the joy and pleasure and color draining from my life. And around that time, as I think we all remember, we heard a lot about essential workers, healthcare workers, sanitation workers, who, yes, are absolutely essential. But I couldn't help but think, what about me? What about mothers, parents? I was working 24/7, holding everything together and keeping people alive. That work felt pretty damn essential. So all of this led me to ask, why? Why do we take care work for granted in America? Why don't we talk about it as the necessary, physical, highly skilled, and creative work that it is? How did care work and domestic labor come to be invisible and undervalued and expected of women, particularly Black and brown women, for very low wages? Child care workers, many of whom are women of color and mothers themselves, they are 3 times more likely to live in poverty than any other worker in America. So we are entrusting that which we say is most precious, right? Our children, our future, to these workers, and we can't pay them a living wage. That is shameful. When I was writing, what I was trying to do was make sense of the present moment, and as all of us are gathered here to do, to envision a better future. And what I learned was actually that we first must reckon with our past. The devaluation of care work in America is a direct legacy of American slavery. The home has always been a workplace for Black women. Many of them toiled without wages and treated as property. All of them. What am I talking about? Many. All of them. And honestly, when I was writing, I struggled. It's like, how do you best explain to the widest audience possible that our entire economic system is inherently designed to exploit women of color? So, in the midst of the pandemic, a statistic emerged that put it all in place for me. It was about Filipinx nurses. People like my mother, who immigrated in 1970 and worked for over 40 years as a hospice nurse. So Filipinx nurses who were educated in English language systems because of America's colonial rule, we don't talk about this much, but America's colonial rule of the Philippines, they are overrepresented in critical care and ICU care because these jobs are much more physically intimate with patients, and therefore they were considered less desirable by white nurses. So this meant that starting in March 2020, Filipinas cared predominantly for COVID-19 patients. All right. Filipina nurses are 4% of the US nursing workforce. They are 34% of COVID-related nursing deaths. Yeah, thank you. So here was a statistic that made it undeniable, that lives in my body, will never go away. The lives of women of color in this country are considered less valuable than those of white women. You know, the women in my family were not enslaved like generations of black women, and our family stories and individual stories differ, but I realized that all of these women's lives were shaped by the same forces: capitalism, colonialism, exploitation, extraction, white supremacy. So I grounded my book in my Filipino-American family history because I know that storytelling is vital. It makes the political personal. It creates an emotional access point for people. It is really the engine of empathy. Writing this book forced me to wrestle with the privileges that I had being born an American, the way that my life is different and frankly much more comfortable than my mother's, than all of the women of color who came before me. It also forced me to reckon with how I am a beneficiary of and also complicit in an unjust system. And to ask, what do I want to do about that? So today, I am inviting all of you to join me in the very challenging and very necessary work of confronting our history and starting to create real solidarity with domestic workers. I think as Americans, we are really good at seeing ourselves in others. But how good are we at seeing others in ourselves? I know so many people in this room are mothers who are just trying to make ends meet, just trying to stay afloat in a country that really does not want us to thrive. We are no different from the women we hire to clean our houses. We are no different from the women we hire to take care of our children. And you know, sometimes this can be uncomfortable to hear, but it's the truth. So the question is, the more important question is, what do we do with these unsettling truths, right? Those of us in this room, we have some measure of economic and social privilege, and we must listen to women of color, and we must leverage whatever power we have to advocate for them and to work with them to create a more sustainable and equitable care system. As we all know, the theme of this year's conference is Making the Future. It is time for all of us to take an active role in making a future where all people are cared for and can care for their people. A future in which we finally value care, financially and culturally, as the essential work that it is. Thank you. Thank you. I am not done yet. So I just want to say that this is a really long and difficult fight, right? It asks us to use our imaginations, to imagine new possibilities, to build collective power. That's hard. So luckily, I'm so excited to invite Vicki Shabo on stage. Vicki is someone who has been working on paid leave policy and gender equity for years now. She does it as a senior fellow at New America, and she's going to come out here and we're going to have a conversation where she tells us what to do, and she's going to walk us through some steps that we can all start taking right now. So please welcome Vicki Shabo. Hi! All right. We were talking how we have limited time, so we're gonna just dive right in. So I wanna know how you came to this work, doing paid leave policy. Thank you for your work. And how did...
You're welcome.
Yeah, what brought you to this?
So happy to be here again in this room. So I came to this work personally, as so many people do, and that is something I've come to appreciate in talking to journalists and legislative staffers and legislators like Katie Porter, who was here earlier.
Shout out Katie Porter.
Always a shout out to Katie Porter. So I came to this very personally. I was working as a lawyer in a law firm when I was pregnant and had my child. And as a lawyer, I had a very generous 100% paid leave policy at a great law firm. I actually had extended leave while I was on leave. They made it longer for women and men equally, which is something that's very important. But I looked around and realized that my secretary would have had 60% of her pay for 12 weeks. The support staff in the building, the mailroom folks, the janitors, the very people you were talking about, the child care
people who
workers,
actually keep things running.
The people who make things work would have had little to no leave. Some of them might have been contractors. And the inequities that build upon inequities, we know economic security, health, well-being of children, your ability to stay at work and succeed in the workplace and go up a career ladder all depend on your ability to take the time that you need and come back. And so it made me really passionate about this work, and I've been doing it for about 13 years. And
amazing.
We've made a lot of progress, but there's still a lot to build, and that is why I love talking about this.
And I think it's true. We've made a lot of progress. You know, we were talking about paid leave. I voted in an administration that ran on paid leave. But, you know, there's been some frustrations along the way, too.
Absolutely, and none more than this year.
But let's zoom out a little bit and talk about how, you know, this is a really great statistic. So 8 out of 10 voters in America support paid family leave. You know, and this transcends, at this number, this transcends party lines. And many of the same number of people support home-based and community-based care. So please help us understand, why is there such a disconnect between these priorities and what our politicians and representatives?
It's amazing. And just to underscore, there are 53 million caregivers to children or older adults in this country. 8 in 10 people do not have paid family leave through their jobs, and 94% of the lowest wage workers don't have paid family leave at their jobs. 94%, 6% of workers have dedicated paid family leave at their jobs if they earn below $15 an hour.
Wow.
So almost nobody, unless they live in a state that's passed a program, and I'll chat about that in a bit. You know, half of American families live in childcare deserts, where there are more than 3 children waiting for every childcare slot, and we have a huge backlog of home and community-based care and an aging population. And so people's lived experiences and what policymakers are doing is very disparate right now. We came closer than ever. As you said, President Biden ran on a care economy agenda for the first time ever. It's in the budget. It was part of the Build Back Better Act that passed the House of Representatives. And yet, when tough decisions had to be made because we have this false narrative about austerity, all of the care agenda was dropped, which was, as somebody who has worked on this for years and years, very discouraging and makes me want to go run a bead store on the beach somewhere instead of continuing to do this work. But it's so important because there are all these people that are counting on it. And so, you know, we need more elected officials like Katie Porter and others who come from diverse backgrounds, families of color, families who have care workers in them, people who are child care workers. And we need, as you said so beautifully, to see others and ourselves, and to recognize that our struggles are all connected. You know, it isn't just me dealing with my own maternity leave or my neighbor dealing with her cancer diagnosis or my other neighbor trying to deal with their aging parent. We are all in this together. We all have the same struggles, and we need to expect that there is a role in government to help address these things.
Well, I want to thank you, because as someone who's been working on this for 13 years, it can't help but be really disheartening, right? And I love the origin story of how you go into this work, because it is that solidarity that I was talking about. You know, I believe people really have that in them and want to go with that and lean into that. So I want to ask you, because I've been on book tour for a lot of this year, and people really want to know, what can I do? People ask me that all the time. And I say, because I do believe that this is true, that, you know, you can pay your nanny more, you can check in on your community, right? Those little things that we do every day, they matter. They really do. But again, you cannot get around the fact that this is a systemic issue. This is systemic failing, right? It's not a personal problem. So how do we build, how do we build that collective power?
Yeah, well, we need to change the systems. Yeah. I think you write in your book, and so many others have sort of talked about, like, the system that we have right now was designed by people who were not caregivers,
right,
who were not women, who were not people of color, who were not immigrants.
Right, so in that sense, the system is working exactly as designed.
Yes, and that system is reinforced by this idea of individualism and sort of free enterprise and neoliberalism and pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Well, like, your bootstraps don't work if you have kids and parents relying on you. Your bootstraps don't work if there's a pay gap between women and men, and particularly women of color and white men, that requires, for financial reasons, in most cases, a woman to be a caregiver when in a heterosexual two-parent family where one person needs to stay home. Like, our system doesn't work when our social narrative and cultural narratives, like, reinforce the idea that we're in this by ourselves, right, rather than reflecting, as you said, that 80% of people who don't just believe in paid leave, who don't just believe in home care, but believe that there is a role for government, yes, and for public investment in fixing these systems. Yeah. And so that is where we need to start to make change. And we do that, I think, in 4 ways.
Yeah, we've created this slide for you. Because we really think, I think it's important to leave here with I don't want you to feel hopeless. We don't want you to feel that way. We want you to feel like these are small steps, but they matter. Again, like, life is hard for all of us, but we have some power, we have privilege, and we can use it. It's time to really put it to work.
Yeah, so, you have to share your stories. Sharing your story is really powerful. Sharing your story with your neighbors, with your friends, with your coworkers, talking about these struggles that everybody is facing in different ways, but that are common, helps to build community, helps to build a recognition that, like, it's not you that's doing something wrong. It is that the system isn't working for people today. You need to support public policies. I bet everybody in this room is part of the 80% of people who support public investment in these policies. So support these policies, ask your elected officials about them. We're 2 weeks out from an election, close to 2 weeks out from an election. Like, ask at town halls, write letters, call, make it known that these need to be priorities, that, like, yes, climate and healthcare, the 2 things that got done as part of the federal reconciliation bill, are super, super important, but so is care. We can't keep jettisoning care and continue to have a thriving economy.
Yeah, it's impossible.
We can't have a labor force that is responsive to the kind of economy that we want to have without having care systems in place. Third, you all have tremendous influence in your workplaces. You are leaders. You are here because you are makers. Look around and ask what kind of policies exist, not just for you as a professional worker, but also for the part-time workers and the hourly workers in your workplace, and what kind of protections might be in place for contractors in your workplace. And ask what kind of policies are in place for men, and make sure that the policies are gender equal. And lastly, and this is something that couldn't be clearer after this most recent legislative fight, make sure that your company, if you're a member of a large trade association, like the US Chamber of Commerce or the Business Roundtable or the manufacturers, make sure that those entities start to change the way that they're thinking, because they opposed all of the tax increases in the bill, and that is what jettisoned a lot of these priorities. Yeah. So if you can't talk about gender and racial equity out of one side of your mouth and kill the investments that would help to make those changes on the other. And then last, like, we are a room mostly of fantastic, passionate women. We need to call men in as allies and as partners in workplaces and also in homes. We know that the care inequality in home translates into care inequality in society. So those are a few of the steps that we can take to start to make change, and it works. When I started working on this, there were 2 states that had paid family and medical leave programs in place, and now there are 11 plus DC. There were, I know.
That's not nothing, that's
not
huge.
nothing.
It makes, I think about this when you have policies that support families, like, that's like a child's life. Like, let's not gloss over that statistic. Like, that is a whole universe, right? Like, that makes such a huge difference in a community and in an individual's life. Like, those things are so important.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is our last question, because I know we're running low on time since they were sort of like mashed up together. And I'm so glad, though, to be able to marry like the sort of creative writing and thinking with like on the ground fight. Like these are the things that we need to like, again, solidarity, like we are in this together. How do we find ways to work and collaborate? You know, so much of my work sometimes exists in this like nebulous storytelling. You know, speak truth to power. That's real, but it is also like, how do you build? How do we translate personal politics, right, into systemic change?
Yeah, so I've been thinking a lot about that in the wake of the legislative fight. So one thing that I've been focused a lot is in getting Hollywood to tell different stories. We heard a lot here about representation. Constance Wu yesterday was so powerful.
Not just positive representation.
So many of the speakers talk about representation of identity on screen. I think we also need to see the way that gender, work, family, and care interact in people's lives on screen just as they do in real life. And to be able to tell a narrative about how these are public problems, how our lives, there couldn't be nothing clearer in the wake of a pandemic that killed people, that caused a health crisis, that caused a caregiving crisis, that caused a labor force shortage, which is really a shortage of policies to support workers and good jobs. There's nothing, and then jobs. There is nothing that could make this time clearer than that our private lives are public issues. These are issues of public concern. And then the last thing is a big topic, but I have to say it, which is democracy is broken. And until we fix that, until we fix redistricting and voting rights and campaign finance reform and ethics reform, like these are the things that have also created a political system where 80% of the people want something and we have zero policies at the federal level. So we've got to fix those things. We have to join common cause.
I think about this a lot. You know, we talk about America it's an experiment, right? It's a democratic experiment. Like, it's not working.
We cannot.
We know this, and I don't. Again, like I don't like to be gloom and doom, but I think like we just threw a lot of stuff at you, but like we need everyone in this fight at all levels. So like whatever resonates with you here, I think like you can go and do those things in your community at home, and if you have that bandwidth and energy to go out and work on systemic change, please do that.
Yeah, we cannot take democracy for granted, and we can't make these issues private any longer. And so.
That's right.
Go forth.
Go forth. Listen to Vicki and go forth.
It's on us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.